Alright, well, I was getting ready to do my top 20, which might be split into videos. I don't know. But my top 20 childhood favorite movies. And I realized there was one missing from that list. So we're going to take a look at The Mask from 1994, starring Jim Carrey. In a year that was Jim Carrey's year, he had The Mask, he had Dumb and Dumber, he also had Ace Ventura. So that was a big year for Jim Carrey, his breakout year. 3 movies in 1 year. And The Mask is based on a comic book of the same name. And comic book is dark, gritty, and bloody. And this is a live action cartoon, so to speak. It's PG. PG. I made a PG movie out of a comic book that was rated R. The movie tells the story of Stanley Ipkiss, your normal, everyman type character. He's shy. He's not, he's overlooked all the time. And he works at his bank. He meets a woman named Tina, which, he wants to have the confidence to ask out, but of course he can't. And Tina is played by Cameron Diaz, and her first film role, by the way. Depending on which Cameron was, I guess he was in Once Bitten, wasn't he? Carrey was in Once Bitten before this, so I guess that, but so it's not his debut role. But we have some characters here. We have, I don't know if I'll be able to figure out who it is. We have Charlie, Stanley's best friend, played by Richard Jeni. We have Peter Green playing the villain of Dorian Tyrell. And then we have Peter Riegert playing the character of Detective Mitch Kellaway. More on him later. There's also the character of Peggy, played by Amy Yazbek. And yes, that's the same actress who played Flo in Problem Child. Chuck Russell directed this. What other films did Chuck Russell direct? He directed, I think, one of the Nightmare on Elm Streets or one of the Friday the 13th. I think it's Friday the 13th, the final chapter, I think he directed. I think. And then, he also will go on to direct The Scorpion King, which I also think is another fantastic film. Let's not forget about Doyle, who's in this film. Okay, so we have this mask. We see at the beginning, during some construction, this chest is broken open, and this green wooden mask comes floating out, right? That's our mask. Stanley, one night... Now, I never liked this scene, to be honest. He goes to the Coco Bongo Club with Charlie, and they purposely keep him out. Despite the fact that it's very obvious he's with Charlie and the 2 other girls, they don't let him in. Why? Because he needs to be shamed, so he wanders and finds the mask. We could have done this in some other way. But he wanders, he goes to a bridge, I believe to consider suicide, when he sees someone there in the water, but it's not. It's just the mask laying on something else. Finds the mask, and, we find out that the mask used to belong to the Norse god Loki. Now, there's actually a deleted opening, which is on the Blu-ray that I watched. The quality varies, but it's these Vikings, led by Leif Erikson himself, come to the New World, and they bury this chest. And there's a funny joke where they're like, "You discovered a new world. Shouldn't you name it?" And he goes, "Leave that to the Italians, because as we all know, Amerigo Vespucci is who it's named after, and he was Italian. So, and Columbus was Spanish. But anyway, So he finds the mask and it finds out he gives him his powers. What I do like about the mask is that it's not just you put it on and you become this character. It goes off of your personality. So if you're someone like Stanley, who's shy, meek, wants to be more, forward with women, wants to have a, bigger, better life, you become this crazy, excited, love, addicted character like the mask, like you see. Someone like Dorian Tyrell, as we see later in the film, when he puts it on, he becomes a true villain. And I always like that contrast, where when Stanley puts it on, he becomes wacky and zany and a very Jim Carrey type character, whereas you put it on Dorian Tyrell and he becomes this villain. And I always think that Dorian Tyrell is a very underrated comic book villain. They throw out Loki and they throw out Jack Nicholson's Joker, which is a good one. But Dorian Tyrell gets no credit. He's a great villain in this. Although the mask does get thrown under the bus when it comes to comic book adaptation films, I think it's one of the better ones. Despite the fact that it doesn't really draw much, I think from what I could surmise, the only scene they really took from the comics was the balloon animal scene. And in the comics, he actually kills them with the Tommy gun, where here, he scares them away because PG. Interesting to note, though, that in the comics, Stanley Ipkiss was only in part of the comics. Like, I think the version that was in it was part of a collection of comics, and then became its own thing. When it became its own thing, it was actually Detective Kellaway who became the Mask. And through all this, there was going to be a sequel. And the winner in the Nintendo Power magazine was going to win be in the Mask too. What we got was Son of the Mask. Which, yes, because I'm doing this, I will eventually have to review. Pray for me. Pray for me. I might have to get the frying pan out for that one. But anyway, yes, I would have loved to see a sequel where Kellaway finds the mask and starts to try to, he's trying to figure out what exactly happened. He knows Ipkiss was the mask, but then he also knows that Tyrell was the mask. So what is he doing? He finds the mask, he puts it on, he becomes the mask. I would have loved to have seen that sequel with him as the mask. Especially since they couldn't get Jim Carrey back because he wasn't doing sequels anymore because Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, flopped at the box office. So he stopped doing sequels. Instead of bringing Jamie Kennedy in, I know by the time that they did the sequel, Peter Riegert was probably too old for the role, but if they did this in 1996 and actually went by the comics and gave Peter Riegert, get him in there, be the character, I think it would have worked. It would have been a different contrast from Carrey's goofiness because, as you know, the mask goes with the personality of the person. So it would have been different, and they probably would have had to up it to at least PG-13 because it would have been darker, but I think it would have worked. Now, I mentioned the deleted alternate opening, but there's also another deleted scene. Do you ever notice that, there's the scene where Peggy gives Stanley to Dorian Tyrell and Dorian puts on the mask? You ever notice that Peggy just sort of disappears from the film? That's because originally she died. She was going to try to leave. Dorian picks her up, throws her in a printing press, and she's dead. But it's very subtle in a way. She just printed out on the paper that says reporter meets demise, but it's red ink, like it's blood. It's pretty cool. It's also on the Blu-ray, the deleted scene. Again, varying quality. But they kept it out because they wanted a chance for Peggy to get redemption in the sequel, which we all know. Which means that they always intended for Jim Carrey to come back and, I still would have loved to see Kellaway. Doyle is fantastic. He's Kellaway's partner, and he's that when they're doing the Cuban Pete and he goes like this, you start dancing, I'll play your price out. I love that. But yes, Jim Carrey's performance in this film is fantastic. All performances are actually pretty good. Even Cameron Diaz, and this was like her first big role, really, was this film. And I think it's fantastic. And some people might say, oh, but the CGI on the mask sometimes it's always terrible. But think about it. It's not supposed to look realistic. This was 1994. There wasn't much for CG, but it's supposed to look animated. The mask is supposed to be very animated. You know what I mean? So that works, especially when you use the "ow woo woo woo" the wolf thing, and because Warner Brothers and New Line they have a connection. So yeah, I think The Mask. It's not Jim Carrey's best film. There's another one which I will eventually review. I think is his best film. It's my favorite of Jim Carrey's films, by the way. But this is up there. So for The Mask, I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I really enjoy this film. I enjoy watching it. Ever since I was a kid, when I first watched it on Starz, when you had to get the black box to get Starz and HBO and stuff like that, back when they first started that. Remember when HBO was Channel 4? At least for us here in Minnesota. But, yeah. It was a regular cable channel, HBO, and then you had to pay for it. But then you had to get a big box to do it back in the day. At least for us here in Minnesota. Maybe different for you, but you had to get a big box. And you had Starz, HBO, Encore, Cinemax, and then many Cinemax channels, many Starz channels, stuff like that. And that's how I saw The Mask and eventually Scream. Yeah. This movie is fun. I highly recommend it. I bought that bitch for $1. More than $1. I bought this. I think this was in the $7.88 bin. So I bought this for $8. So that's not bad for 2 films. And yes, I have seen Dumb and Dumber, and I've seen half of Dumb and Dumber 2. I have not seen Dumb and Dumber. Eventually I will get to reviewing those, but for now, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what you think about The Mask. I'll see you in the next one.